there, everybody. Welcome to Football Outsiders Live. It's our daily live stream every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to welcome you to the show. It's me, Aaron Schatz, editor-in-chief of Football Outsiders, joined as always on Mondays by Ian O'Connor from EdjSports, live streaming on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. So if you are watching us, please be sure to make comments in the chat, ask us questions, and if you're on YouTube or Twitch, please like and subscribe to the show. It's also available after the fact on the Football Outsiders Podcast Network. Please subscribe to the show on the Podcast Network and give 5-star reviews so more people can find our shows. If you leave a review on the show, we'll even read it next time. All right, let's talk about Week 6 in the NFL. We're actually going to start with Sunday Night Football. In case you didn't make it up late enough, the Pittsburgh Steelers beating the Seattle Seahawks in overtime. Boy, this game started slow, but there were a lot of interesting moves in the second half. Costly Mike Tomlin error helped Seattle make it into overtime, even though they did not eventually win the game. Ian, let's talk about Mike Tomlin's errors in decision-making.
Yeah, late in the fourth quarter. This is one I think you and I have probably talked about a couple times throughout our similar calls throughout the season and throughout our time. But minute and a half left, 4th and 3 on the Seattle 34. They're tied at, I think it was tied at 17 at this point. Chooses to kick the field goal instead of going for it. So taking that temporary lead, kind of a moral victory for the time being. But still plenty of time, especially in the NFL. 90 seconds is a ton of time for Seattle to march down the field and tie the game or win the game. That cost them 8.7% prior to the snap. Just the decision to kick the field goal instead of go for it was our third worst call of the week. And that is even accounting for Geno Smith at quarterback. So as Scott Brown and I earlier were talking, you can only imagine how much bigger that error probably would have been if Russell Wilson would have been quarterback. May not have been in the same situation, obviously, but even accounting for Geno Smith, that's still a 9% error for Mike Tomlin. And it did allow the Seahawks just enough time. They went down, tied the game, and sent it to overtime. One of, I think, 3 overtime games yesterday. There was one in each window, the 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 8 o'clock that kept me pretty busy yesterday. But then when he got into overtime, there was another one. I think it was their first possession right after the Seahawks punted, 4:33 left in overtime, 4th and 1 on their own 29. So this is one of those decisions that we're going to get a lot of pushback on. You're at your own 29. If you don't get it, your opponent's already in field goal range. All they need is a field goal to win it. But if you punt the ball away, you've got no choice but to try and stop them. It's 1 yard. It seemed Najee Harris handled the ball, it seemed like 200 times yesterday, and was able to get at least 1 yard on pretty much every down. Every time he touched the ball, it seemed like, for the most part. So that team will say what you want about their offensive line and their struggles. For a guy and an NFL team, to get 1 yard is more often than not going to happen. So that one cost them 1% more than what that one did at the end of regulation at 9.7%. And that was our second worst call of the week.
Yeah, got bailed out on the next play as TJ Watt forced a strip sack on Geno Smith, and then Pittsburgh recovered and went on to kick the game-winning field goal. But that strip sack on Geno Smith was a pretty big play as far as win probability goes. Yeah,
so he got bailed out, as we'll see with, like I said, these are the top 2 worst calls of the week. Number 1 coach, worst call this week, also got bailed out. But yeah, this one, TJ Watt doing what he does. They recovered the ball, cost the Seahawks 49% in win probability. Pretty much took the Steelers. I think they were probably over 90% at that point. I don't have that exact number on me right now, but they were up pretty high. Actually, I do. Sorry, it took them up to 97%. So they were at the 16. So pretty much we never want to say guaranteed or an automatic field goal because we know how that goes, especially after last weekend. But 49%, and that was the most impactful play of the week in Week 6 so far with just 1 game to go.
You know, that first one you talked about, you mentioned that we've talked about this situation multiple times. It came up with the Patriots against the Buccaneers a couple weeks ago, and that is when the coach plays for a long field goal with time left. There's 2 negatives about that, right? Tomlin decided to kick a field goal of 52 yards with 1:35 left. There's 2 negatives. One, you're kicking a long field goal, and the longer the field goal, the less likely it is that it goes through. You would much rather kick a field goal in the 30s than you would 52. And the other is you're giving the other team time to come back. So like what happened in the Patriots-Buccaneers game was it was a slightly longer field goal, and it was in the rain, and Nick Folk missed it. But even if Nick Folk had hit that field goal, he gave Tom Brady time to come back. I realize here we're talking about giving Geno Smith time to come back. It's a completely different animal. But still, the Seahawks did score some points this week. So you're trying a tough field goal at 52 at Heinz Field. And then on top of that, even if you make the field goal, you give the other team time to come back and tie, which Seattle did and sent the game to overtime.
Yep. And you mentioned, them scoring points like that from the first, and you mentioned that game started slowly. From the first half to the second half, Seattle looked like a completely different team showed up on a bus, and they just switched out their teams. And they were, Geno got them right back in it.
Alex Collins got them right back in it.
Alex Collins, right. He handled the ball. I think he had about 30 rushes on that first drive alone in the second half.
It's interesting because I think it was Ben Baldwin who posted on Twitter and said, Seattle has a drive like this like once every 3 years, and that just convinces Pete Carroll that you have to run it all the time. Mm-hmm. But I actually was listening to this game. I was not watching it. I was listening to it on the radio in the car on the way home from the game we're going to discuss next, which is Dallas, New England. And I was listening to the Seattle broadcast over satellite radio. And at halftime, they were like, Alex Collins has 5 yards of carry. It's a small sample size. They actually used the words sample size. So credit to the guys who do the halftime show for Seattle radio. But they said, we might as well see if we can get more out of him. And then they went out on the first drive of the third quarter, and Alex Collins had like a zillion yards. So I think it's probably more proper to say Alex Collins got them back in the game than what Geno Smith did.
Yeah, and Collinsworth and Michaels, I think, both said the same thing you did about Pete Carroll. Like, that he loves these kind of drives that really gets them going and this and that, run the ball. But both teams, it seemed like Pittsburgh did the same thing with Najee Harris. I had Deontay Johnson for fantasy, so I'm wanting to see some throws, and it seemed like every single time they go Najee on first down, Najee on second down, sometimes Najee on third down. It was kind of back and forth, both teams just seeing who could run the ball better, and that's how they were both deciding they were going to win the game. But
I will say one of the hardest things about my job is figuring out how much to dock teams when they bring in backup quarterbacks. It's very tough. There's like a kind of it's not necessarily a science as much as it is an art, because figuring out what the drop is, the drop from a regular starter to a backup is different than the drop from Russell Wilson to a backup. I may have underestimated it because Seattle's offensive DVOA was 23% in weeks 1 to 5, minus 17% in this game. Wow. So that's a big hit from Geno Smith.
Yeah, they, like you said, it was, you say that it was Alex Collins, was the best. Geno did, we kind of talked about this morning too, the offense as a whole did just enough to kind of keep them in it, but still not the same as with Russell Wilson there. So they'll hope to have them back pretty soon. They've got a couple games, I think, coming up against, fairly or below average. I think it's the Saints and the Jaguars. So they may be able to get by with 1 or 2 wins.
Not against the Saints. Saints are a top 10 DVOA team with an excellent defense. Let's talk about the other big national game yesterday that was on at the 4:30 slot, and that is the Patriots and the Cowboys. Patriots almost stole one from a better team. But it's interesting, DVOA, if you look at this one without opponent adjustments, like with opponent adjustments, the Patriots had the better game, because stronger opponent adjustments for playing the Cowboys. But the best way to really compare how teams play in a game is without opponent adjustments, and it was basically equal. Minus 4.8% DVOA for the or VOA, no defense adjustment. Minus 4.8% for the Patriots, minus 5.4% for the Cowboys. So basically exactly the same. Another back and forth game that needed overtime to decide. Mike McCarthy gets a lot of guff on the internet for mistakes he makes and things that he does, and he did have some good calls and some bad calls in this game.
Yeah, he had some really good calls in the first half, we'll say, because that's kind of the way it went. Like you said, he gets a lot of criticism, but he does a lot better than what people give him credit for. He'll go for it. He's aggressive, and people say he's being too aggressive or making, stupid decisions, and it's McCarthy, so they kind of criticize him a little bit more, I feel like. But he does fairly well in our coach rankings, which we'll have coming out here in a few weeks, I believe, as well. So we'll see. But yeah, first half, he had the 5th best call of the week and the 4th best call of the week. That 5th one was first quarter. This was towards the end of the first quarter. Had 4th and 1 on their own 47, chose to go for it. This is kind of a no-brainer these days. You're nearing midfield. A team like Dallas should go for it. Kansas City did the same thing on their opening drive yesterday. A little bit more time left in the first quarter. Obviously, theirs was around 11, but same thing, powerful offenses. This one added 4.5% win probability prior to the snap there. Ezekiel Elliott was able to get 3 yards, get out to the 50, added about, I think, 2.5% win probability. And for those of you that listen that may think that's not a lot, it's because, and we've explained this on some of our other podcasts and other shows, that with a team like Dallas on a 4th and 1, they're expected to convert that fairly or very often, so that it's baked into that pre-snap win probability. So your gain's not going to be that high, unless you have a big run. But they were able to convert that one. The one that's not going to show up in our top 5, but I do want to mention, is the one on the very first drive. They had 4th and 1 at their own 34. Pretty much got hammered for going for it because they didn't get it. So, it's early in the game. You're a favorite. You don't need to give them opportunities to score. They didn't get it. New England went down to score, but at the same time, it's early in the game. You're the better team. You're the favorite. You should be able to overcome that. If you don't get it, but odds are you're going to get it. And that was a 2.9%. I think it came out about a 0.5% shy of being in our top 5. But again, with an offense like that, going for it is the right call. McCarthy did by our numbers, made the correct decision on that one. And then coming down, the 4th best call of the week I mentioned was that late in the second quarter, a minute and a half left. They had 4th and goal on the 1. This was right after Dak Prescott. It looked like he scored. They didn't call him in.
A lot of disagreement on the Twitter about whether Dak Prescott really scored on that 3rd and 1.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't see the ball. I thought he scored, but even on the replays, it kind of looked like the ball was back by his hip, and it may not have crossed. But that one was closer than what happened on the next one. The decision itself was a great call to go for it. Again, 4th and 1, especially on 4th and goal at the 1, unless you're coming down, the last seconds of the first half or something, we're typically going to recommend go for it. There are some times even then we'll recommend the field goal just to get those points, especially if you get the ball back in the second half. But this one added 4.8%. Like I said, was the 4th best call of the week. As we know, that's the one that was called a touchdown and was reviewed because it was a score and saw that Prescott had the ball knocked loose just before crossing the goal line on that Drew Brees jump sneak, whatever you want to call that. So that was the first half. Like we said, it's kind of a tale of two halves for him. Then the next one he had, when it really mattered, he failed the test. 4th quarter, 2:47 left, 4th and 2 on the New England 33. They were down 21-20 at this point. He chooses to kick the field goal. Very similar to that situation we talked about with the Steelers and Seahawks, except even more time.
Going for a long field goal while you give the other team time to come back, rather than trying to convert and take time off the clock and get the field goal shorter.
Yep. And in this situation, there's even more time left. Dallas still has all 3 timeouts. So even if they go for it, don't get it, they've got the 2-minute warning and 3 timeouts to stop New England and get the ball back. It's only a 1-point game. Not great field position for them. Instead, they kicks the field goal. They missed it. So ended up giving them even better field position than had they gone for it and not converted. Obviously, that's not something, we don't play the results, but just something that you do want to note after the fact. But the decision not to go for it cost them 12.8%, which was the largest or worst call of the week as far as fourth down decisions go. And again, like we said, bailed out by the defense. Trayvon Diggs, who's had a phenomenal start to this season, has, as a defensive player, has more touchdowns than his brother Stephon Diggs through 6 games for Dallas, 5 games for Buffalo.
I was shocked. I was shocked that the Patriots threw the ball there, which I was glad that they were aggressive, but I was shocked that they threw at Diggs in that situation, knowing that how good he is at taking the ball and turning it back the other way. But then they responded with a touchdown of their own right afterwards that was also thrown at Diggs and went for 75 yards and a touchdown. So those had to be gigantic win probability plays.
They were, yeah. The Trayvon Diggs pick 6 right after the missed field goal, 2.5. I think it was 2 plays later. There was a penalty. I think that sent up the 2nd and 15. Was 47.3% win probability swing for both teams. Obviously lost by the Patriots, gained by the Cowboys. The second most impactful play of the weekend by our numbers. And that took Dallas from 20.1% up to 67.4. So from winning 1 out of 5 to winning 2 out of 3 is a huge swing there. And then the touchdown of their own was 24.6% win probability, which I think it was just outside our top 5. I think it was 6 or 7. I believe it was 6. And then the 4th and 4 conversion by Dallas at the end of regulation or overtime. I don't remember which one. I think it was the end of regulation was number 7. So 3 of the top 7 most impactful plays came from this game. And then, as we know, overtime, Dak hit CeeDee Lamb for the win. Got injured. Hopefully, we'll see how Dak says he's going to be okay. But I didn't even see that happen until I think it was later last night. They were saying he had come up with an injury. But just an awesome game, a thrilling finish up there in Foxborough. It was a great game you got to see yet again. It seems like you get all the good ones here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would prefer the good close ones if my team won them, but
absolutely
hugely important plays on that last Dallas drive. Like you said, converting 4th and 4 from their own 35, and then they got the 24 yards on 3rd and 25 from their own 45 after an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, a weird sort of never really explained unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on an offensive lineman got knocked them back from field goal range back to their own 45. They then got into better field goal range with the 24-yard completion and kicked the field goal to send it to overtime. I thought Belichick was very conservative in this game. A couple of things that stand out to me. The first is one we don't normally talk about very much, and that is decision to run out clock at the end of a half. The Patriots got the ball back on their own 20 with 1:30 left in the second quarter. Now, they had no timeouts, but still, you can at least run a couple of plays and see if you can get some yards with a couple of passes before you kneel on the ball. I would choose to be aggressive there, especially because you are the underdog and you need to use underdog strategies. And instead, Belichick just had a run go for 6 yards and then kneeled on the ball and just took it into the half.
Yeah, I think too. What I've noticed, I don't know if this, if it adds up, just from games that I noticed, it seems if a coach knows they're getting the ball in the second half, they're way more likely to just kneel on it with, 30 seconds, whatever it is, when you have a chance, like you said.
You have a chance to score twice. Yeah. The other is Belichick's decision to punt on 4th and 3 in overtime from his own 46. Now, I was critical of this during the game. My feeling was the Cowboys' offense is so strong. The Cowboys had more yards yesterday than any team has ever had against the Patriots with Belichick as head coach.
Wow. It seemed like they were dominating, and that game was just the score didn't seem to reflect what I was watching.
Yeah, I was surprised that the DVOA came out close, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I expected the Dallas to come out much higher.
Do those turnovers have a big effect there, or is that not
the turnovers definitely
the biggest part?
The turnovers definitely have an effect.
Especially in the end zone, I imagine that is a bigger effect.
Yeah,
because both of them were in the end zone. Yep.
And the fact that Belichick punted there turns out to not be a huge error, I guess.
Yeah, I was actually just as surprised as you were. It comes out to only a 1.1% error, and this is going to take a little bit of explanation, but it's what we have errors that we call high confidence and I guess just regular errors. For lack of better terms for those. But this one was not a high confidence. And what a high confidence is so we've got, our customizations. We utilize DVOA to come up with these team customizations and run them through the model at any point in the game to get these win probability numbers. And the high confidence is we look at on every play, we run it with the customizations, but then what we do is our model runs each play as if the team on offense has the worst offense and defense in the league. The team on defense has the best. So you're the worst team going against the best. And if it still says you should go for it, typically it's a smaller margin for obvious reasons. But if it still says you should go for it, that's a high confidence error. In this case, it actually was not high confidence. And as I said, it was only 1.1, which surprised me as well. I figured a lot, especially in overtime. Possession is just so important, especially when you get for New England, like you said, if you don't get it or if you punt, Dallas just needs a field goal to win. Whereas if you go for it, at least you give yourself a chance. You're up near midfield, 25 yards isn't that big of a difference for that Dallas offense. And in that situation, you said you're an underdog, like just it seemed conservative play calling, as you said, from Bill Belichick. But yeah, that one turned out to be not as big as you would think. I know some other models had them. They were kind of all over the place. I think
ESPN had the punt as the right decision. Yep.
Yeah. So interesting to see on that. Yeah, we had it almost a toss up. Yeah, 1%. We still did like to go for it, but a very small margin on that compared to what you would think in some of the other decisions.
All right, thanks. Let's hit those most impactful plays. Let's hit the most impactful plays of the weekend. Thanks to everybody who's watching us right now, live stream. Don't forget, every weekday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Let's talk about the top 5 most impactful plays of Week 6. We even have a little graphic. The first one's a little weird, I think.
Yeah, number 5. Jaguars, Dolphins, they're tied at 20. It's in overtime, the early morning game over in London. 4th and 8 at the Miami 44. The Jaguars have the ball. So just across midfield, this was right after Miami went for it on 4th and 1 and did not get it. We'll get to that decision when we get to our best and worst decisions there to let you know if that was the right call or not. But this one was where Scott Brown and we did our podcast earlier, and he was saying, first off, before this play, I think he said the last play finished with like 10 seconds left. Jacksonville waited till 5 seconds to take their timeout, then decided to go for it. So they've got 5 seconds. They need 8 yards to get a first down. I guess maybe their thinking was, we get the first down, we get 9 yards, we've got a chance to go out of bounds or call a timeout, or we don't get it, time runs out, we go to overtime. But they converted. They got 9 yards on the play to Laviska Shenault. Were able to call a timeout with 1 second left, I think it was. And this increased their win probability about 25%. As far as the decision goes to go for it here, we actually had this, and this is something we talked earlier too. This is kind of when it comes to those end-of-game models, the assumptions you have to make and things, the amount of time left. The model says, on a 4th and 8 especially, you're going to convert that maybe. I think the numbers I had earlier were around 35% of the time. Scott had mentioned, a 62-yard field goal, especially for, I think it's a rookie kicker, mentioned him cut by another team. A 62-yard, he goes, maybe you're going to give him a 5% chance of making that. So your odds of converting aren't high, but it's better than kicking that field goal. So why not take a chance to try and get that first down, get that.
Yeah, and the assumptions are a little weird there because the defense is going to play Hail Mary. Mm-hmm. They're not going to expect that you can make a short pass and get out of bounds in time.
Yeah. Nearly
so
10
it probably
yards.
Is easier. It probably is. You're probably more likely to convert the 4th and 8 than you would be otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the flip side, if you don't get it and there is a second left, you're leaving either no time left on the clock, or say if there's a second left, Miami has the Hail Mary, a chance from 56 yards, which unless you're Aaron Rodgers, or we saw Baker Mayfield do it yesterday, but chances of converting that are probably maybe even less than a 62-yard field goal. I don't know what the kind of some assumptions there, like you said, but if not, very, very low probability. So, but the conversion said they got 9 yards, called the timeout, were able to kick the field goal, was a 25% increase in win probability. The number 4 comes down to another kick. Minnesota is always in these games, it seems like, this year, and tied at 28 after the Panthers made their comeback. 6 seconds left. They send Greg Joseph out to kick the field goal to win the game. He does not make it. 47-yarder, a fairly high probability or relatively good chance to make that for an NFL kicker. He misses it, and that costs Minnesota 36.7%. So the reason this one isn't much higher too is because they've still got overtime to fall back on. If this had been, Vikings down 1 or 2, that's going to be probably an 80-something%.
And they're favored, so their chance of winning in overtime is greater than 50%.
Right. Yep. So that ends up just being 36.7, but still good enough for 4th this week. Number 3, back to Dolphins Jaguars. Again, this is the result of that other 4th down play. We'll get to the decision on that, but Brian Flores chose to go for it, 4th and 1 at their own 46 in overtime, or into regulation. With a minute 49 left. Did not convert. They were stopped. So they lost 38.3%. Again, the possibility of overtime there is the big factor there. That's not a much larger number. Still good enough for number 3. And then the top 2 we covered in the top of the show just minutes ago. The pick 6 by Trayvon Diggs was 47.3%. And then the Geno Smith, where he gets sacked, fumbles recovered by Pittsburgh, was 49%, coming in at number 1 in our most impactful.
All right. Don't forget, folks, again, if you are listening to this as a podcast afterwards, subscribe to the show, rate us 5 stars. Please leave us a review. Please make sure you subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Feel free to add comments or questions on the show. Let's talk about the decisions that coaches made that had the most positive impact in terms of win probability. These are the best coaching decisions of the week on 4th downs. And I believe we've got a graphic for this too. And we covered the first couple already in the show because they're Mike McCarthy.
Yep, Mike McCarthy, 4 and 5. The 5th one was that 4th and 1 near midfield was a 4.5% increase prior to the snap. The next one was that 4th and goal at the 1 was a 4.8%. So a couple really good calls. And I mentioned the one in the opening drive of the game was around 3%, 2.9. So over 10%, 11% on 3 plays, but it was the one we'll get to later he didn't make. That was the biggest. But coming in at number 3, I mentioned this, the Chiefs, Andy Reid, don't remember if it was the opening drive or the Kansas City's drive if Washington punted. I think Washington got the ball first, but they driving down, get stalled 4th and 1 at the Kansas City 47, almost identical to Dallas. Choose to go for it, which absolutely makes sense with that offense against that Washington defense that has not been anything that it was last year, what we thought it would be. Expect some regression on defense, as I know you've talked about a lot, Aaron. It's a lot harder to repeat a defensive performance, but they've just been a lot worse.
Regression means you become average. Regression does not mean that you suck.
Right.
Regression means you go to average.
Yeah. And one note I did see on that regarding that defense, kind of a side note, I don't remember where I saw it, was the fact that Washington, I know we in Football Outsiders adjust for defense, but we're last place the year before, I think, and played a lot of maybe backup quarterbacks below average teams. Yeah. This year they're facing number 1s because of where they finished in the division, but still they've been terrible. So you would expect the Chiefs to go for that. Andy Reid knows that, and they picked up 5.2% win probability just on the decision to go for it, and then got another 3% on the conversion. Darrell Williams picked up 5 yards there to get the first down. Heading up number 2, coming back to Jaguars and Dolphins. They were all over the place in the impactful plays. This one was Urban Meyer. This one was early in the 4th quarter. So one that isn't really talked about as much based on those 2 that came at the end of the game. But 4th and 1 at the Miami 9, leading by 4 already. So this is one I was kind of surprised to see him go for it. It was the correct decision by our numbers. Increased their win probability by 6.5% versus a field goal. The reason I'm kind of surprised there is, Urban Meyer still going, Jacksonville's still looking for their first win. They've got a 4-point lead. You probably see a lot of coaches kick it there and go for that 7-point lead, make them score a touchdown, extra point. Still a lot of time left, but I was very surprised to see him make that call. Really any coach or many coach in that situation, that's not really a knock on Urban, just in general. It seems like consensus is you take those 3 points that are very, very high probability at that.
No, we save our knocks on Urban for the Wednesday and Thursday shows with Mike Tanier.
I believe it. So yeah, that one comes in at number 2. Good call there for him. And then number 1 is the one we mentioned as well in the impactful plays. We looked at the result. Now we're going to look at the decision. So Dolphins, Jaguars, 2020, 4th and 1 at their own 46. Miami chooses to go for it, does not get it. But you still, like we said, you've got overtime to fall back on. But if you convert here, you're up near midfield or close to midfield. You still have the ball. The most important thing, especially in a tie game there, they only got 1 timeout left. Jacksonville has 3, so they can still stop you and get a chance to get the ball back again. But going for it and keeping the ball in your team's hands makes the most sense. And that's exactly what they did. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for them, but hopefully that does not discourage Brian Flores from making the right calls going forward. And then said that was number 1. That was a 20.6 or 21.6% increase in pre-snap win probability. When we get to the worst decisions, we'll see him again on that list as well.
Don't forget to comment on the live stream, like and subscribe our channels on YouTube and Twitch. We want to hear from you during the show every weekday, 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll flip it around now and talk about the worst decisions of the week for 4th downs. These are your punt decisions. I mean, almost always anyway.
Pretty much. Yeah, so number 5 was the Vikings and Panthers. Second quarter coming down into the half, 4th and 1 on the Minnesota 34. Vikings have the ball. One of those that, people are always going to disagree with. You're in your own territory. A lot of time left in this game, though, or in this game. You've got Dalvin Cook. They gave him a pretty heavy workload. He looked healthy yesterday, had, I think, 120-something, 130 rushing yards, scored a touchdown. And just, again, it just comes back to that 1 yard is all you need. And with this one, too, we kind of talked about, Minnesota still has all 3 of their timeouts at this point. There's 3:11 left in the half. If you don't get it, Carolina, yes, they're in field goal range, long field goal range at that point, but that drive is going to come to an end or come to a conclusion much quicker, especially when you've got your 3 timeouts, a 2-minute warning. There's a good chance Minnesota's going to get the ball back in that half and get a chance to score again. So choosing to punt there cost them 3.6%. Not one of Zimmer's worst decisions, but like we saw a few weeks ago, he's had some really bad games.
He's pretty conservative on fourth downs.
Yeah, and I feel like there was the game, even after this game last year, the Seattle game, he had a 4th and 1 down inside the 10, had a chance to kick a field goal to make it, I think, an 8-point game. They didn't get it. Russell Wilson went down and ended up scoring to win the game. Ever since then, he's had a couple good decisions, but even before that, he was conservative. But he made that, that one decision and just got hammered for it. And it seems like he's reverted back or just still kind of stayed conservative. I wonder if that kind of is in his head at all. I'm sure, with some of those coaches, they think about that. But then that kind of comes into our number 4, as I mentioned. Brian Flores of the Dolphins, he went for it late in the game. About 5 minutes earlier in that game, he had 4th and 1 at his own 46. Exact same situation, except he was leading by 3 at that point. Chose to punt, and that's when Jacksonville went down, ended up tying the game. But this one, he learned from it and ended up going for it, but it might not have been in that situation if he would have gone for it from the first place on this possession 5 minutes earlier. So that was a 4% error for that one earlier in the 4th quarter. Going to number 3, we've got the Steelers and Seahawks. I think this is one that we mentioned. These top 3, we mentioned all of these already, So I'll just kind of briefly run through these. It was the 4th and 3 at the Seattle 34. Tomlin chose to kick the field goal to take the 3-point lead for the time being. 8.7% decrease in win probability, and then tied at 20 in overtime. 4th and 1 at his own 29. Chooses to punt with 4.5 minutes left in overtime. That was 9.7%. And then Mike McCarthy with the number 1 overall error this week after having such a good game before that as far as 4th downs go. Trailing by 1, kicks the field goal with 2:47 left to try and take a temporary lead there for the time being. That was 12.8%.
Yep. All right. I want to remind everybody, you can find all of this stuff at EdjSports.com in their top 5 editorial section. And you want to read the Risky Business column, which you'll find on both Edge Sports and Football Outsiders, about going for 2 down 14. It's a classic football analytics problem that's basically already been solved. So we're explaining it to those of you who still don't understand. The idea of going for 2 when you score down by 14 to make it 8, why you go for 2 there rather than going for 1. Let's preview Monday Night Football before we're done with the show. This is the number 1 Bills defense, one of the best defenses we've ever tracked through 5 games against the seemingly unstoppable Derrick Henry, although I will admit by DVOA. Yes, Joey Suck says, I did not expect Edge to be spelled that way. For those listening, it's EdjSports.com. Henry's having actually more of an average year as far as efficiency goes. It's not as, his total numbers are a lot more impressive than his efficiency numbers. Bills currently, last time I checked, were -6.5. I will tell you, I think that Edge Sports and Football Outsiders are in disagreement about this pick.
Yeah, so this is I'll go ahead and give the Edge side first. So we've got Tennessee as only 3-point underdogs in this one versus, you mentioned 6. I've seen it 6, 7. I think 6.5 is the last that I saw as well. So we've got it a little bit more in favor of Tennessee, which surprises me a little bit. So based on that, looking at 6.5, we've got it around 60 to 61% chance that Tennessee covers tonight at 6.5. when it comes to the over-under, the total there, we're way under on this one too. So 53.5 is the last I saw in the market. We've got this at 83% chance to stay under. Looking at the public, 83% of the bets, 92% of the money are on Tennessee. And on our podcast that I did with Scott Brown earlier, I said, most of the time, our numbers are good. I trust our model, our numbers saying Football Outsiders Edge. I trust all these numbers. This is one though that I would and will probably take Buffalo and the over in this game. Just from a personal, what I've seen. I know Tennessee has. I think 2 years ago was just an ultra efficient offense. Last year there was there's no way they're gonna repeat it. They did, and this year, they've had some injuries. Tannehill hasn't looked very good. A.J. Brown's been hurt. I think Julio Jones is back. A.J. Brown was supposed to be back. He popped up with an illness yesterday. I think I haven't heard anything if he's going to play. I expect them, or just kind of have a hunch that they're going to score some points, even if it is garbage time. But like the Bills to put up a ton of points and the Titans to put up enough to go over that 53.5. In my opinion, like I said, our numbers at Edge disagree. Heavy on the under and pretty heavy on Tennessee to cover. I disagree.
The Edge formula that comes up with picks against the spread is based on DVOA and Dave, and so is my Football Outsiders formula. Yet we come up with different results. I come up with that Buffalo. I would pick Buffalo minus 6.5, not Tennessee plus 6.5.
I would too.
Part of it, I think, is home field advantage. I don't know if the EdjSports formula has made any adjustment yet for the fact that home field advantage seems to be completely gone.
Yeah, that's something that I know we've talked about, and I've brought that up a couple of times, thinking because that it seems like it's always the home teams that are underdogs we have favored a little bit better, and I think there is some home field advantage still on there. So I know Scott's working on looking at some of that too. Yeah, like you said, and we've mentioned a couple of times on here that doesn't really seem to be as much of a thing anymore.
I will note that Tennessee's passing game is down to 24th in DVOA this year. Their running game is 8th, but their passing game is 24th. And they have always had troubles on third downs compared to first and second. And they're again this year having the same problem. Tennessee's offense by down, 11th on first down, 20th on second, and 26th on third. Third down is usually not as consistent as first and second, but for Tennessee over the last couple of years, it's actually been very consistent that they struggle on third down compared to first and second.
We saw the Chargers kind of come down too. I know you were kind of
absolutely.
I remember seeing that, and they came crashing down yesterday.
We have a question actually from Black Tepes, asking who he should play in fantasy. He's down 93-97. Emmanuel Sanders or Dawson Knox? Well, we have Emmanuel Sanders very, very slightly ahead of Dawson Knox in Scott Spratt's fantasy projections, but he's ahead by 0.3 projected fantasy points. So it's actually really a flip of the coin.
Yeah.
I guess
I'm in a very similar
situation. I would go with Sanders, because the Titans have been weak against second wideouts and third wideouts this year, and they've been weak against deep passes, and that seems like the kind of pass that they would throw to Sanders. So if I had to make a choice between Sanders or Knox, I would go with Sanders, but the projections have it as a coin flip.
See, I don't like to hear that because I'm in a very similar situation. I'm down 7 in my friends league. I've got Dawson Knox. He's got Emmanuel Sanders. So me and Black Tepes are very similar situations. So I'm hoping Dawson Knox has another 20-point game in him, and maybe he and just Stephon Diggs can catch all the passes, get all the yards. But
yeah, I don't know.
See.
Flipping a coin,
Yep.
But hopefully you'll get your 4 points. Either way, we expect you to get your 4 points. So
should score a lot of points.
So Sanders or Knox, either way, we think you're going to win your game. So that's good.
Yep.
Thank you to our entire audience, including Black Tepes, for watching the show live. Again, we're streaming on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook, and in the upper right corner of FootballOutsiders.com now. Every day at 1 p.m. Eastern, Don't forget, tomorrow it'll be Scott Spratt and Derek Klassen getting you ready for your waiver wire decisions and for your fantasy week 7. Everything is available after the fact on the Football Outsiders podcast network. So please give a review to help people find the show. We'll read your review on the air. Subscribe to the show on your favorite platform. And don't forget to subscribe to FO Plus to get access to all of our data and tools for under $5 a month. For example, you can find out the fact that the Titans are strong against number 1 wide receivers and weak against number 2 and number 3 wide receivers if you look at FO Plus. So go to footballoutsiders.com/subscribe to get FO Plus today. That does it for our Monday show. Thank you, Ian O'Connor, for joining me as always on Mondays. Everybody enjoy Buffalo and Tennessee tonight. Scott will be here tomorrow at 1, and I will see you on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Take care.